In the meantime, let's turn our attention to capital markets in East Africa, specifically the Nairobi Securities Exchange here in Kenya. Now, that bourse has had one of its strongest weeks in years, up by over 3% on the NSE 20 and 8.2% on the NSE All Share. Now, while the index isn't up to the most recent peak of 2,337.85 points hit in early March, it still has not returned to pre-pandemic levels of over 2,600 points. Nonetheless, Safaricom was the most traded counter today, capping a week in which its shares have gone up by just under 30% to just under 20 US cents a share. Now, that's very, very close to a three-year high. And these are price levels that we last saw in late 2022. At these levels, Safaricom's market cap has gone up by at least 45% to well over $7.5 billion US dollars. So let's explore the mood of the market. Peter Ndegwa is the Chief Executive Officer at Safaricom, is joining us live in the studio tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a very dramatic week for you in the market.
Yeah, I mean, we are very excited. Since we announced our results on May 9th, our share has had a lot of interest from investors. We have actually, as you said, moved up more than 40%. Yesterday, we actually crossed 1 trillion Kenya shillings, which is like $7.7 billion. And it's based on the results. The investors are very happy. We announced a $3 billion turnover. We hit the milestone of $3 billion.
First company
in the region.
Yes. $3 billion in turnover.
Yeah, growing 13% at a total level, including Ethiopia. And actually growing both the top and bottom line.
Let's talk about Ethiopia in a bit more detail, because the Ethiopian business, and I know in past annual results, and we've spoken about this off camera, at the time there was a feeling that investors sort of didn't quite understand. There's going to be a bit of pain in the medium term, right, as you get the Ethiopian business underway. What's the status of the enterprise now, especially given the fact that 10 years ago we used to speak about Safaricom as a telco company with mobile services attached to it.
True.
Now it's flipped.
Yeah,
right. It's a mobile money company with a telco function attached to it.
Yeah, so actually at a total level, M-Pesa in Kenya is 44%. So almost half of the business is financial services. Of course, used to be about a third in the past. In 2020, we decided to go towards a technology company. And that's the same time we decided to go to Ethiopia. So in 2021, we got the license into Ethiopia. I know there was a lot of worry, especially in the middle of COVID.
Yes.
But Kenya has been extremely strong. And Ethiopia, we have seen huge commercial momentum. Remember, Ethiopia is the second largest country in Africa. 120 million people, second only to Nigeria. It is the only market that had one player, telco, in the telco industry, and also so there's a large part of the country that's not covered. In just the past 3 years, we put in about half of the network we have in Kenya, just over 3,000 network sites. We have just over 9 million customers. We are closing to the 10 million mark, which is a significant achievement.
You're going to hit 10 million essentially by June.
Yeah, by June. We'll be 10 million by end of June. We actually announced 9 million, but we should easily hit 10 million by the end of June.
If you keep growing at that rate, you're easily going to hit that target that I saw from your CFO of at least somewhere between 15 to 17 million clients in Ethiopia by the end of of this fiscal year.
Yes. So our fiscal year ends March 2026. We guided 15 to 17, and we should be on track. And the reason why we are on track, now we have a scale network. By the end of this year, we'll have about 4,000 sites, which is actually a massive network with over 55% population coverage, which means that actually now we are just past the peak investment. So investors were worried about how much money we're going to put in. We've just spent about $2.4 billion, of which about half comes from Safaricom because they are the majority shareholder. But that has been funded because in Kenya we are generating about $1 billion of cash flow every year. So we don't have very much debt, and I think that's why investors are very pleased. We believed that our share was actually undervalued on the stock exchange, and frankly also suffered from all the money was flowing out into the US, and also at some point from some of the macros. So it also shows that actually there's a lot more confidence in the region. In Kenya, yes, you've seen that the macros have actually improved. The only area that remains is the kind of fiscal pressure that is facing Kenya, but also many other countries.
Indeed. one of the things that we've heard from the finance minister in the last couple of months has been, this intent to say, we're going to, the idea is to try and raise at least $1.15 billion through a mix of privatizations, and the precise details on that are not 100% clear yet. But have there been any discussions at board level to sell part of that 35% stake that the Kenyan government holds in Safaricom?
No, there hasn't been any discussion at board level. The minister made a general statement in terms of how they were going to, because debt is still quite high in Kenya as it is in many other countries. So one of the ways of dealing with some of that is to scale back the investment in some of the assets, including listing some of the companies like Kenya Pipeline. Of course, Safaricom was mentioned. The newspapers, of course, had Safaricom as a headline.
The largest company in East Africa.
But I want to confirm it was more of a general statement. We haven't had any discussion at the board. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, but certainly at the moment, the government has not reached out to the board for any conversation. In a hypothetical sale, under Safaricom's Articles of Association, do either of the primary shareholders get the right of first refusal in case, say, the Kenyan government wants to sell part of their stake, or Vodacom or Vodafone want to sell part of their stake? How does that work? I think the CMA has the right, the rules because we are listed business. So they would have to, it would have to actually to be governed by the CMA because everyone would be entitled to purchase some shares. I suspect that's why there is interest, not so much because government would want to sell, but more because of the strong performance, especially the solid Kenyan performance, but also the progress that we are making in Ethiopia.
Okay, so with respect to the 2025 finance bill, there's some interesting proposals that are being baked into that, including an effort to repeal Section 59A of the Tax Procedures Act. And essentially the reading that I'm getting from a lot of the experts around this is that it would essentially allow the tax agency to have access to client data without having to go through the courts first. If, say, KRA wants to see Rama's M-Pesa records, they've got to go for a warrant to the court, get that done, and then they can come to Safaricom. I mean, on balance, this would be a net negative for the financial services business if it's passed into law, wouldn't it?
So we've always been asked, of course, there's always public participation around this matter. We've always said that it's very important that we stay within the Data Protection Act. And the Data Protection Act so far actually guarantees rights of users like our connectivity users, but also M-Pesa users. So this has been mentioned even in the past. I know there'll be a lot of debate, but our view is that they should always go through the current legal process in order for them to access any data. And I know there has been conversations in the market about whether telcos provide or give any data on customer information. I can confirm we don't.
You did issue this statement on June 11th saying there was no contact at all between Safaricom and the police leading up to the arrest.
Yeah, it was a very unfortunate. It's a very emotive matter that occurred and very unfortunate. And for us to be associated, it was unnecessary and of course very false. And we didn't have. We read in the newspapers in the same way that everyone saw the tragic occurrence in the media.